Bill Meyers again, going over my mentors, and I want to talk about two of my favorites, Dianne Reeves and DeBarge. Now, Dianne is one of the best vocalists I've ever heard. Incredible power, range, ability to improvise, just everything. Her performance, for example, I don't know if anybody's watched the movie Good Night and Good Luck. She just was absolutely delicious with the jazz trio that she sang on a lot of the cuts for that movie. I was recommended by George Duke to work as musical director with Dianne in the late 80s, but I couldn't find the time. I was working on a record of my own at the time, and I suggested David Torkanowski, who was perfect for the job. He's a tremendous piano player. If anybody want to check him out on YouTube. Anyhow, I got a call from David about a year later inviting me to play with Dianne and their ensemble at the Blue Note in New York. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And I found a way to kind of move my schedule around because I jumped at the chance. I thought, this is going to be fun, man. I'm really liking it. And so basically, while David played acoustic piano, I would play Rhodes, and I had a bunch of synthesizers for like strings and horn parts, and in addition to the Rhodes to fill out the sound. They wanted a little more depth to the presentation. I finally met her in New York, and she was great. She was real chill, and she was easy to hang with. And if I would see her get the least bit aggravated, it would be with good reason. You know, somebody didn't do their job. You know, didn't get something done. But rarely did I ever see her lose her temper or anything like that. A thing happened that blew me away the first night we played. We started on a mid-tempo song that was, swing tune. It was a mid-tempo, and it started with something like ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba, da-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-da, do-da-da-ba-ba-ba-ba, boo-doo-doo-da-doo-doo-ba-ba-ba. And then we go into this really nice, I would call it a standard. I didn't recognize it, but it was a great song. And so we were going through the verse of the song, and at one point David cut us off. And as we went to a stop, Dianne started to sing a cappella, and this was her way to invite the crowd in and say stuff. And she was scatting just beautifully, and she would point people out and say, good to see you here tonight. She'd be improvising, and like I say, pointing out people in the crowd. She was changing tempo, changing keys. At one point, I looked at David. She was like about 2.5 minutes in, and I said, hey, man, are you going to give her, a key to get us back, to the original key? You're going to hit a note. And he just smiled at me. He said, just watch this. Check this out. And as Dianne finished and she got toward the end of the scat, and David started counting us in on the intro, and she had basically got to this point where she held this note, and he counted 2, 3, 4, ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba, and she was perfectly in tune, and she jumped 3, 4 keys during that scat, and I was just blown away. It was picture perfect, and really enjoyed that moment with her. Anyhow, in the meantime, I got to meet DeBarge through Maurice White, and I consider him music royalty. A real genuine person. He sings, composes. Everything he does is with taste and groove, and I had pleasure of working with him on his In the Storm album that Maurice produced. I did some horns, played a few parts for him also. But he's an open book. You can feel the honesty that is his, just come through. And he's had his rough periods, but kind. And he was kind and generous to me. I loved his writing style. He used a unique chordal approach to real catchy melodies, and I'm a sucker for that stuff. So if you jump ahead to 1995, I was working on my album, All Things in Time, and it had a combination of instrumental songs and vocal songs that I was singing lead on. But I really wanted an emphasis of groove. The record before, Color of the Truth, was a little more rock-oriented, and Images was something really crazy. It was a direct-to-disc album where the pieces, it had jazz influences, but it was material that was visually influenced that I wrote on that. But on this one, I just really wanted to have emphasis on groove. So I wanted the last cut to be different than the others and be more intricate and a longer piece. I was searching for ideas, and at the time I was still running a studio in Diane Warren's wing of 64 Sunset. And one day she came by and she introduced me to this young artist from Kinshasa, Africa, and he was living in France. And his name was Jean-Paul Wabute. So he followed me in my studio, took a look at everything, and then he said, "Hey, would you like to jam?" And I said, "Sure, yeah, okay." So I agreed, and fortunately I put in a cassette just for shits and giggles, you know. And so we jammed for about 10 minutes, and I followed this little melodic pattern that he sang kind of in an African dialect. And I added chords, and when we finished, I said, what are you singing about there? You know, and he said, "I was singing something like we're all from the same family, and that all men are brothers, and we should be kind to one another." And I thought, wow, that's brilliant. That's wonderful. So then a seed of an idea kind of took shape. I've never seen Jean-Paul since then. I sure hope he got his royalties on the record. It says he supposedly did on all credits. Anyhow, so I got an idea about a little jam, and I thought that we could all present it like it was played in Africa first, and then it hopped across and morphed into a Herbie Hancock type groove in the United States and America. So I titled it Across the Water. And the first person I had in mind was Dianne, and I wanted her to sing the first half and for Elle to sing the second. And fortunately, they both agreed to help me. And my pal and co-producer, who you'll hear more about and is also a mentor of mine, was Jimmy Randolph. And he did his usual brilliant job of sequencing stuff that I didn't do. And this is for young arrangers, composers, and musicians. Don't sequence everything yourself. If you can't get other energy on it, inevitably, particularly people obviously that you respect and do a good job, because mixed energy from more than one musician really makes a beautiful marriage, you know. And Jimmy's just been the best for me. So he did a great job on sequencing the drums and bass on the piece. And I added Brandon Fields on sax. Ever since Images, I've used Brandon on my projects. And last but not least, I got Joe Vanelli, who had now become a wonderful mixer and had a great studio. He did the mix, not only on the song, but the whole album, All Things in Time. So Dianne came in one afternoon and proceeded to lay a multitude of voices, both high and low, which I didn't realize she had that kind of range, because I was thinking maybe I'd get a male to sing the bottom part. But it was wonderful. It was just amazing. Elle was in shortly afterwards, and then I had him coming in on the second verse, and then continue with Elle, you know, through the rest of the piece, where it morphed from being an African rhythm to sort of a hip hop, Herbie-ish type of groove, and I let other musicians, you know, make their contributions to the record. Also, we had a percussionist in there, and we had I managed to get Herbie's Paul, I'm forgetting his last name, but I played bass clarinet on it, and it came out great. I was so appreciative that these people, not worrying about what, neither of them asked me what I was going to pay them. They just said, we're there for you. So I want to mention them both in the same sentence because they worked on this piece. I want them to know how indebted I am to them.